Sound effects recording and sound effects layering, it's a lot of fun when you know what you're doing. And we're going to make sure that in this chapter and the following that you have everything that you need to be able to know how to do that and get some awesome, totally dope sound effects libraries for yourself. And we're also going to show you in the post process how to layer multiple sound effects so that you get gigantic, juicy, high production value impact and immersion for your audience. Let's roll. So why do we want to deal with sound effects recording at all? We've got bazillions of sounds out there available to us in libraries. Well, mainly because 3 reasons. 1, synchronization. Maybe you've got a situation where there's a video synchronization issue, whether it's footsteps or some kind of long drawn out door or long drawn out Godzilla cry, whatever it is, spaceship flying by. You need to design something specifically and record it and mess with it so that it matches sync. Another thing is just simple customization. You may want to just customize a sound so that it is something maybe we've never heard of before or a mixture of all kinds of things. The third thing is it's just going to be cooler than a library if you use the ideas and the wisdom of this course. You could come up with something way cooler than just your standard library. Now, where would we record something like this? Well, this actually wouldn't be a bad place to do it, in an anechoic chamber where there's absolutely no reflections and everything's perfectly dry. The problem is there's no sound effects happening in here. This is for microphone testing. So find it out in your realm where you can do all kinds of custom recording and see what's possible.
When we record sound effects, sometimes it's not obvious which microphones to use. And sometimes the process of recording sound effects can be incredibly dynamic, really, really soft, really, really loud. And sometimes that loud, dynamic volume may not seem loud because it's happening at such a soft volume. Choosing the right microphone to be able to handle big transients, whether they're really loud or just really dynamic, is one of the most important things we can do when recording sound effects. So I've got the Saramonic TM7. This is a hypercardioid, great for rejecting sounds on either side, but great for picking up really nice full range sounds while we're on axis. And to test this series of microphones that we're going to go through, I'm going to use one of the most difficult things to record that there is, keys. And you wouldn't think keys are that difficult, but the reason they're difficult is because they're soft and we're inclined to turn up our mic preamps louder to get a better gain, but they're also very, very transient with lots of spikiness that happens that can easily overload your preamp and your recorder, and sometimes even your microphone if you have it turned up loud enough or are too close. So we've got ours turned down plenty fine. Let's check out and see how the TM7 sounds with recording keys. Let's try the TM1. Let's try the NV5. Let's try the 747. Let's try the M1.
So that's a dynamic microphone, and the rest were condensers. And you can really hear the difference between that dynamic feeling and the condenser, especially with stuff that's high frequency like keys. Hopefully this shows you the radical difference between each individual microphone for recording sound effects. Obviously we've heard of for dialogue and things like this, but now hopefully you can choose the right one for whatever sound effect that it is that you're trying to record. And if you have questions, come onto the cinemasound.com website and ask on the forum, or come to our secret users group on the Facebook group. We'd love to see you there. Stereo, that's what's next. I mean, I remember when in the 70s when LPs went stereo and movies went stereo. It was like, whoa, big deal. And in sound effects, man, recording in stereo is awesome, if you can pull it off. And it's really easy to do with an XY microphone like this. Two microphones put together so that there aren't any phase issues to generally represent how your brain hears. It isn't really that way. But if you pan them left and right, they make a really great panoramic field. We're with the H6 again. And this is the built-in XY microphone, which is also the same on the Q8 and the same on the H5, beautiful sounding XY. These are condensers, so very sensitive. Be careful, they're very transient with keys. Let's see how they do. Not bad. Let's try another version of stereo. MS microphones, or mid-side microphones. And I know a lot of you are getting tired of seeing this microphone, but I love it. I know it's like, there's a lot of other MS microphones out there, but I love this one from Zoom. Check it out. This is those keys again, but listen to it in MS. It's a huge field compared to left and right. Now, the other thing you can record with is surround microphones. Now, we don't have a way to play back for you surround microphones because you're just listening to it on two channels here live in our B room, but you can record anything with like a holophone or anything you can get your hands on, even just setting up multiple microphones in a field or all kinds of other ways to get a good sound, especially if the sound is moving. Perfectly legitimate. Don't mix the channels to mono. Don't mix them to stereo. Keep them discrete so that you have maximum control in post. So what recorders should we use? I don't care. I mean, really, whatever works for you, whatever's cheapest and gives you the best value. You don't have to have fantastic recorders, but what you do have to have is excellent analog to digital converters and excellent clock. Now, I'm not going to get into all that because it doesn't really matter to learn why that is. Just when you buy your audio recorder, make sure that the ratings or the reviews or don't get into the science, but just ask around and go, how are these analog to digital converters? And they'll tell you things like, oh, it goes to 192 kilohertz or whatever. Doesn't matter.
What?
Sometimes it matters, but generally it doesn't. The analog to digital converters are independent of how high the frequencies it will record or how many bits. You can have a beautiful 48 kilohertz, 24-bit recorder. You can have a crummy 192 kilohertz, 24-bit recorder. It depends on those analog to digital converters, and then it matters on the clock. We don't want to introduce what's called jitter. And that clock needs to be super steady. Now, I will say that the higher that you go in terms of sample rate tends to be a better clock that they have to stick in the machine. So a 192 kilohertz clock probably does really, really well at 48 kilohertz. General good rule of thumb. But keep those two things in mind. Your analog to digital converters are critical and your clock is critical. Now, as to brands, again, I don't care. Zoom, sound devices, send, I don't know, whatever you want. My advice, get what you need to get for the next 5 years of your recording. Technology is always going to change. It's always going to get better, faster, higher, glossier, cleaner. But get something that you know, if I buy this, I'm good for 5 years. You're going to want to get 4 inputs or more. You know, the H6 has 6 inputs. The H4 has 4 inputs. The H5, 4 inputs, okay? Even a Q8, 4 inputs. 4 is your minimum. A stereo recorder, you're not going to be happy 5 years from now. So in terms of recorders, H6, fantastic recorder, 6 inputs. Zoom makes it, all kinds of bells and whistles, all kinds of attachments to the head, fantastic. H4n, arguably the most popular recorder of all time in terms of field recording. Everybody's got one. Awesome little recorder. All kinds of the features that you want. Really nice analog to digital converters. H5 from Zoom again. 4 inputs. It's got 2 XLR 1/4 inches. And again, those attachable heads. And those heads can attach to just about any Zoom device that has detachable heads. The XY, the MS, the HyperCard 8, all of it. Really good analog to digital converters. Q8. And you're like, dude, that's a camera. I know it's a camera, but the inside of it is basically an H5. And if you ask me, don't tell Zoom, I think the A to Ds in the Q8 are better. And Zoom will tell you they're exactly the same. I know, but something in how it processes the data and compresses it makes it better. And it comes with a camera. Not bad. F8, Zoom's little rocket ship of a field recorder. 8 channels in. It's only got 2 channels out, and you have to kind of monkey with the output of it. But come on, man, $1,000. It's like this big. Time code. It's the first recorder that I've used under $1,000 that has a slate that goes to all channels. Super convenient. You can stick it in your bag and go on the run with it. It's super light. F8. Roland R88. 8 in, 8 out, time code, everything you want and nothing that you don't. I mean, it's the gold standard of anything you'd want on set. It's reasonably lightweight and it's reasonably priced and it's the thing you want if you want to have it for the next 10 years. iPhone. And you're like, dude, that's 2 channels, not 4. I know, but you're always having your iPhone around and you can use any number of attachments. The Rode makes one, IXY, stick it on the end of it. You've got an XY little attachment, or you can even use the microphone that's on your white little headphone looking things. Don't ever use the microphone on the iPhone. It's terrible. But the one that's on your little headphone thingy, it's pretty good. It goes way up to 16K, super sheeny bright, so you got to be careful. Doesn't do bass frequencies very well. But if you've got one of those attachments that go into a lightning port or whatever port you've got a venerable recorder that'll get out to 96 kilohertz. Yeah, you'll get some jitter. The clock's not great, but if you're in a pinch and you can't get it done otherwise, look, man, use your iPhone. Just don't tell anybody. What level should we record sound effects at? A lot of people think you should just record it at the same level that you record dialogue. No way. Wrong answer. You need less headroom for sound effects to get away from the noise floor. You want a really strong signal to noise ratio. That means that the signal is way, way louder than the noise floor that it's in the middle of. You know, you always have noise floor from equipment and all kinds of things. We want that to be as low as possible and the signal as loud as possible. Now we never want to go over 0. We don't want that. But because it's sound effects, usually you have control over the situation. You know how loud it's going to be. If you don't, then if you're not sure what's going to happen and you have one chance to get it, give it more headroom, obviously. You always have RX or some other thing to get rid of the noise. But generally speaking, we're developing our own sound libraries or we're recording something in which we have control. You want to be able to have less headroom, record it above -10, somewhere in the range of where you've got 4 or 5 decibels of headroom if you dare, and it's not super transient. So get as much signal into that recording as possible. Don't do it like you do with dialogue. When I was in college, we actually had to transfer files on floppy disk. And I'm not talking about the HD hard plastic ones. I'm talking about like the actual ones that were floppy. And then we had this cool thing called file sharing, right? Where you do these crazy cables between rooms and you got like 15 kilobaud. It was amazing. Oh my gosh. Now, we have things like SD cards and high density hard drives that are the size of my fist that are 4 terabytes. The one thing I want to bring up to you is about SD cards. And, tape was nice while we had it. Cards are better, but only if you have a protocol in place to make sure that you don't lose data. And with the fact that cameras and computers and recorders and all kinds of other devices use the same kinds of SD cards, it's really important that you keep straight what format of card goes with what. Because we've all seen reformatting cards, getting the wrong format in a camera, having it actually say that it's fine, and then shoot something and have it be corrupted. Or in a recording device, we've seen it all. Or you take it and it was formatted fine in your recording device, you put it in your PC, it's fine. You put it in an Apple, especially if it's System 10.3 or earlier, it's gonna add a weird format to it and now it's corrupted. Bad things happen. So just keep careful tabs on what SD cards are formatted for what. Because some older gear, and even I think maybe some of the newer gear that's coming out is very, very particular, persnickety about what it wants to see and what it doesn't want to see. 2, don't buy cheap SD cards. I'm just going to tell you a quick story, just a quick story. Buddy of mine's buddy shot on a camera They had a nice little layout for several days. The producer, who's my buddy, told his buddy, listen, go buy these kind of cards. Do you think he did that? No. He committed false economy and figured he'd save a few dollars on cards in order to help his budget. What do you think happened? He shot on his DSLR, frames were dropped, a lot of frames, and nobody knew it until they got into post. Yes, he saved a few dollars to reshoot everything again. Buy the best possible SD cards you can and keep track of your format. Things will go a lot nicer for you.
When you're lining up sound effects, or really any kind of sound, it's important to be able to know that you've got various sounds in sync, either with themselves or with some kind of a hit or something like that. And the way we do that, the easiest way to do that is to set a marker, some kind of a marker, and then drag the sound so that it's lined up with the marker. So here we've got this marker that's here. And the thing that gets real confusing, however, is your zoom level. Because here at this zoom level, it looks to me like I'm lined, like the beginning of this waveform is lined up with the marker, with the the play marker. But as I zoom in fact, I'll just keep this zoom for you. You can see as I zoom in, I'm nowhere near that at all. And in fact, the beginning of the waveform starts way over here, and we want it to be here. So never be fooled by zooming out. We want to always make sure that we're zoomed in pretty far to make sure that we're in sync with something. And it's the same thing if you want to line something else up. So let's say here's another, this is a bullet. Actually, this is funny. You can look at this. At this zoom level, it looks like you're actually too far. There's a space on the left, but actually when we zoom in, wrong button, we see that we're quite well in sync. And then let's say we want to line up this explosion kind of cannon looking thing with this one. Well, we can again do this and go, oh yeah, we're in sync. But the minute we look and zoom in closer, we can see that we're not quite there. Very, very close. We probably want to be something like this. So we use the waveforms and the zoom to make this these kind of sync decisions rather than just kind of being out here. Now, would it matter, if you were a few milliseconds off? Well, probably not. But if you're not perfectly in sync or within a millisecond or so, under 2 milliseconds or so, you have phase issues, especially if it's the same sound. If for whatever reason you're lining up something that's the same sound, or some microphone that's, or rather the same sound on a different mic is what I mean. You're going to have phase issues and it's going to sound wonky and things like this. Once you're here, then you can, if you want to tidy things up, you can go like this and do all kinds of stuff. But it's getting that initial sync using the waveforms to do it. You can also double click and look here and actually line it up perfectly. The problem, at least in this version of Adobe Audition, is that you can see that, well, in fact, let's just double check. I don't want to say something that isn't true, but if I go all the way into this waveform, which here are the samples themselves, and I'm saying, yes, I'm right in line with what it says here, but then if I go to double click, you can see that the synchronization with the spectral layer, the spectral view, is not the same. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. Hopefully they will work that out soon. I tend to always go with what's here in the timeline rather than what's in the spectral view. Seems to be a little bit more accurate, just so you know. Now we're going to use a lot of the techniques that we see in the edit volume and synchronizing with waveforms to do layering of sound effects, layering them just straight and then layering them temporally. What does that mean? Well, temporal layering of sound effects means that you're layering sound effects over time. We're going to start with a simple example because sometimes sound effects have multiple sounds over time. And one of the easy examples of that is a jump rope. Here is a jump rope that Andres Acosta and I recorded back when we did it a show at B&H back in 2015. So it's three jump rope hits. And what's interesting about this is that this is actually not a jump rope. This is actually light, like a very small light cable going on top of that we're whooshing around and slapping on a piece of carpet that's in front of a fireplace that's made out of tile that gives us just about the right kind of thickness that we needed for that particular scene in that show. But it's still very compelling, and it gives us a great example that there is a whoosh and a hit afterwards. Right? That's what we want. It's a whoosh and a hit. Now you can, of course, find just straight jump rope samples that somebody's done that and, have also added footsteps in there and jumps and things like this, just because they've recorded someone actually doing that. But let's say this is for let's say you didn't, and let's say you had to recreate it from scratch. Here's how we would do this. First, we would find something that sounded like the slap of the rope against some kind of flooring, maybe tile. In this case, let's take a look at this. And that's, pretty simple sound. It's what it actually is the sound of rope, or rather reins on the hind end of a horse. How about this one? There's a different sound version of it, and that one. Sure. So what we need to do is organize these slaps so that they make some kind of a rhythmic feel. Obviously, that is too fast. So we're going to have to do these this way, kind of do a regular spacing. Let's see how this works. Okay, that's okay. And we might even come back and do this again over here, like so. So we've got 4 of them in a row. Yeah, this one's a little late. Just kind of eyeballing it. So we've got these in a nice order now. Yeah, it's okay. And then we've got a little whooshy action. Now this is actual rope whooshes. Wait, I'll just go like this so we can hear it by itself. And that's pretty fast. I mean, unless you were doing doubles and jump rope, right? That's pretty fast. So we need to actually cut these out and spread them. And you can just see how these kind of accelerate, or rather they bulge, and 1, 2, 3, 4, that's where that is. So we'll just kind of find each one of these. That's fine. We'll cut each one of these out. And I've got snapping on, that's why it's snapping to the cuts really nicely. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of this for now. We'll also now line these up with our slaps. So they need to come just before the slap parts. See how this works for us. Okay. That worked. About this one. Yep, that's okay. And then this one. And this one. Now, what's interesting is that even though this is the same hit, because we're using a different slap, it will probably occur to your brain that that there's not any kind of machine gun looping going on. Yeah. Now, obviously, it's really, really stuttery, so we want to add some nice crossfades. Now, if you've got some digital audio workstations will allow you to do copying and pasting of fades, which is really, really cool, or a keyframe that'll allow you just to say, oh, make them exactly this length. But we're going to use here in Audition just a little manual version of same. There you go. Now, the mix is obviously a little funky, so we'll turn down. I'm using the knob here for volume on the track. The whoosh track should be a little bit quieter. Okay, and the slaps should be a little bit slappier. Get these a little bit louder, maybe 6 dB or so louder. Excuse me. Yeah. So if we wanted this to sound like it was going into a room, we would need to add a reverb. And we talk about this a whole lot in the mix and fix sections. I'm going to add a stereo. Oops, that's not what I wanted. A stereo bus. Oh, I did add a bus. This bus, we're going to add a little convolution reverb right here. We're going to say Judge's Timbre. Should be nice. We're going to make the mix 100%, so it's exclusively reverb on this thing. It's going to come out the master. Then, let's go back to where we were here. Beginning. There are our slaps on bus 1. We're going to say go to bus A, or send one rather, bus A, each one of them, including the whooshes. Let's see how this goes. Too much, obviously, but there's our reverb. Way too much still. Maybe just so 40 decibels or so. And the whoosh. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Actually, let's put a limiter on it because we're crushing the output of this. Oops, here we go. Amplitude compression. Hard limiter. Hard limiter basically keeps the master output from going over. Kind of gives it a haircut. Yeah. So there you go. Pretty easy way of doing a little layering and a little tomfoolery of the ear just to make some jump rope. You can also EQ this if you wanted, because it is a little bright. You could take, in fact, let's go look at that for a second. Double click on this. We'll take the EQ. We'll make it a little darker. Let's go back home. Maybe even more. Maybe even more. Way down. Way down. There we go. Do the same thing for this hit because they're on each individual track. So we got to do it to all three of these. There we go. And to this one. Yeah. And now that it's darker, we might even be able to add just a little bit more room. Well, looks like a lot more room. Cool. Let's try another example. All right, the next thing let's take a look at is just something as simple, quote unquote, as a door opening. Again, tons of pre-made door opens that you can use, but for the purpose of temporal layering, and in fact just general layering, this is an example of what we can do with the sound effects. Here's a pre-made glass door open sound. In fact, we'll turn this up so we can hear it quite a bit better. So there's really three aspects of this if you remove the footstep. You've got the door where somebody grabs the handle and turns it very sharply, right there. And then the door begins to move. And then as they release the door handle, it snaps back to its neutral position. So we really have, a door, the opening of a door really has four elements, which is, of course, the swish open of a door. But most doors don't make a whole lot of noise when they actually swing from closed to open, those few millimeters. It's mainly the creak of the door that our brains go, oh, the door's opening. And you hear that, you hear the handle, and that's what you hear. So what we've got here is a little door handle sound. And I'll take the EQ off that I had on before. I'll also take the reverb off that I had before.
Okay, so here's the open, or rather the turn to open it, and then the turn to close, the release. Now, the problem with this is that most people don't hold the door as it continues to open, and we want to determine the speed of the opening of that door by the squeak, and here is a squeak. That's a pretty fast door open, much faster than what this will allow for these two doors, for the opening of the handle. Right? Obviously, they would release the door much sooner. Let's turn this up a little bit more so it's a little easier for us. So all that really needs to happen is we select this. We'll cut it. Oh, I don't need to select all of that, for goodness sake. Just from here to here. Awesome. Something like this, maybe. And maybe a little bit later, let's get rid of this crossfade. It's better. I like it here. And maybe even earlier. And maybe even move this door squeak so it's a much quicker door open. Even earlier. Right? All of a sudden, that feels good. It feels like a much faster door open. And especially if you had a close-up on someone's hand where you saw them, do this motion, using a stock sample door open is probably not going to sync right. So having somebody's hand turn and then turn the other way, that's where you need to have this broken down. And then you can have complete control over it. You can even make it so that they turn the door, release it, and then it moves at the end. So lots and lots of flexibility when you can break these things down like this. And it doesn't really sound any better or worse than a full recorded door open. Obviously, the other thing that's occurring in there is additional ambience because the door is opening, if you listen carefully. You hear the door or the room beyond, maybe it's exterior, that the room beyond the ambiences all of a sudden come up. And that's, a perfectly legitimate other element. So why don't we take a look? So if I go to our sound effects library, just here, and I say, let's try forest under sound effects. Notice I'm just using the Finder to find these things, no special software. Nothing wrong with using a special software. I just don't. So let's drop this in here. And let's take control of where that fade is going to be. So the door squeak reveals the fade up of the Forest Day sounds. So it's about right here. And we're going to do our fade up. Okay, obviously it's way too loud. We'll bring it down. I'll get rid of this. And obviously this is way too bright. If you were inside looking out, it would not be so nice and pristine. So we're going to turn back our high pass or our high shelf filter again. Yeah, maybe even more. And we'll pull it down a little. There. Super nice. And then you'd have footsteps if they were walking out or whatever. And here, we've just created a full control over all of this, which is super cool. Let's look at something else that you may run into quite regularly, which is gunfire. So many ways to deal with gunfire. So much fun. just always a gas. No pun intended. Well, maybe a little. But I just want to show you layering and the temporal issues that you need to keep in mind. The purpose of this, all these examples, is to remind you and show you that just because you throw a sound effect in doesn't mean that's enough. You may need to throw a gunshot in, but it may need some more low frequencies. You may need to add the bullet casing if they're on cement. You may need to add a ricochet. You may need to add, who knows what all the elements that need to come in there that are sometimes even milliseconds after where an actual gunshot is, including maybe the cock of the gun or the actual action of the gun cycling if you're on a close-up. So for now, this is a little 45. Pretty nice 45 sample, I think. Let's go to Razor. We're going to get rid of these other ones. We'll just do a single shot. What else have I got in here? I got the casing. Not multiple casings, right? I've heard that on television before where somebody that wasn't thinking or was working too hard on their television series and it was a single shot and there was a bunch of casings that fell down. I'm like, that's interesting. Here's a whiz, little ricochet. Here's a cock, right, from an automatic. And here's some body. With some awesome reverb in there. Fantastic. Let's just sync this up a little bit here so that it happens just right on the hit. Okay. There we go. And we'll sync this up the same with this one. Just about there. Cut. Oh, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Now we know these two are in sync. There we are. If we put these together, we should get a nice big wonk. Pretty cool. What you're experiencing is a lack of body. When we listen to this Canon first, it's huge. And we listen to the 45, it's got a nice crack to it. But when we listen to them together, they seem less somehow. And the reason for that is that part of what's happening is the compressor, the limiter that we placed on our master channel is cutting that down. The way we stop that is bring all channels back to 0. Let's turn off our EQ. And they were up at +6. Now, it's still pretty strong. Let's bring these down to -3. It gives us more headroom so that limiter is not giving us a so-called haircut on our peaks. Oops, -3, please. Thank you. There we go. Otherwise, it'll cut off the top of the velocity of that nice snap. So we can control this, obviously. We can turn the fader all the way off and just have the 45, or we can add a lot of the lows to really make it big. Obviously, it stops sounding like a 45. Let's just keep it nice and easy, somewhere here at -6. And we don't want it to go on forever in the world of reverb, so we're just going to cut it off. We're going to add a little fade. It's a little abrupt. Started earlier. Yeah. Maybe even more of a curve. Nice. Okay, so it's got a big wallop to it, and we love it. That's fantastic. Let's say they wanted the cock. We see it just ahead of time, the cycling of the action. Now, obviously, if this were real life, if the sound of that action were that loud against the bullet, the sound of the explosion of the bullet, it would, this bullet sound would be incredibly deafening. So this cock, depending on the drama, needs to be quite a bit less to seem real. Even less than that. Even less than that. There you go. A little more real. Then we've got the ricochet, which, if we wanted to do that, would happen very, very quickly. Maybe even quicker, depending on where that target might be. Probably a little loud, unless our camera was by the ricochet. Still way too loud. Okay, maybe still too loud. Okay. And then we have the bullet shell casings, and this is my favorite thing that everybody gets wrong. First of all, again, if the bullet explosion was that loud, you probably wouldn't even hear the casing. If you've ever been to the shooting range, you know what I'm talking about. It's some of this very small, dinky thing. And also remember on an automatic, like a 45 like this, that bullet casing is expelled to the right, usually many, many feet away, which is causing it to be even quieter, but certainly panned away if you were looking at the shooter. So we're going to pull this way down. So that's about right. And then we'll pan it just to the way over here to the right. That feels a little more natural. You can bring it up, of course, depending on what it is you want. You can do that. Excuse me. Now, what happens if we want to add body just to the 45? Let's turn off our Canon for a second. It feels really thin. Let's make this ricochet really fast now. Yeah, cool. And we want to do this, and we want to add some body to it. Well, there's all kinds of plugins. You can add a pitch shifter down an octave and things like that, but let's look at Morph from our friends at Synaptic. And the way Morph, it's really kind of a cool vocal, there's all kinds of crazy things in the world of vocals, changing pitches and things like this. But what this does for us is change the format, not just the pitch, but the format, the actual quality of the sound. And what we want to do is leave the pitch the same, but change the format. Format, not format. Check out this. This is solo this channel and make us a nice little loop. Without. Now I can make it get higher. And it's not an EQ. We're not actually adding equalization. We're actually changing the harmonic structure. The fundamental and overtones are being altered here. So I can bring this way down. Turn it off. Now, many digital audio workstations allow you to do a mix, like mixing the actual plugin with the dry signal. Unfortunately, Adobe Audition doesn't let you do that on a plugin by plugin basis, but it does allow you to do it on all of your plugins here on your track. Now, of course, we could add this separately to this clip. But otherwise, if you look here, you have a dry and wet effect mix. Where you can mix them together, which is kind of cool. So now we get that nice crack, and then the bass, the body of it, all together, which is super cool. For now, though, let's say we want to make it all the way wet. Let's see here. Cool. Then I can add thump by using waves, and there's a whole bunch of other plugins that will do this for you, adding low frequency thump that isn't there. Again, not an EQ, because there isn't any thump in the equalization of this, in the frequencies of this. It's just adding low frequency harmonics. And if you're not listening on headphones or have a subwoofer, you probably won't notice this. It'll seem like a really weird example. But I can bring this way up. And it gives me that nice thump. I can also change the frequencies. Make it really, really low down there or higher. But about 100 hertz seems right. And then if we want to add real serious snap, even more of a snap, or cut the snap down, we can use compression. In compression, we talk about a ton in the mix section and in the dynamics, or rather the fix section briefly. But in this case, we're not using the compressor to balance anything. We're using it as an effect to enhance or the detriment to the sound itself, like we do in the music field. So we've got the threshold. Zoom in here. I'm going to bring this way down. I'm going to bring the ratio way up. Now here's the attack at 10 milliseconds and a reasonably long release. Let's make the release instantaneous. And maybe just a little bit slower. 10 milliseconds maybe. Now let's make the attack super fast. We've basically removed, with this incredibly draconian setting, the attack of the gun. And you can raise it up from there and make a very interesting, much more contoured gun sound, or increase the dynamics of the attack, or of the attack of the crack of it, by just adding a few milliseconds to the attack. That's a crazy attack. Maybe 10 milliseconds. And that's like a punch in the face. If I turn it off, you can see what this compressor is doing, lengthening the dynamics of the duration of it, rather. Make it 20 milliseconds. 30. 40. You can hear it starting to expand the loudness of that attack. 70. 100. And if we slow down the release, that's a really, really snappy gun with some bass on it. Here's how it is with all those off and with everything on. It's like a completely different sound with more thump and everything that you can imagine. And we can obviously mix all of these in to the original. And get a balance between the two of them. Now you're hearing some phasing because of some latency issues that Audition has with this. And ideally, you would burn this into the sound and make a new file. But this is what's possible just for layering. We put it all together. And if we make it dry. Oh, wait, let's put the Canon back in. Let's make it now super wet. That's pretty cool. And then dry. Super useful. All right, one more example. And this is with a punch. And you're going to deal with a punch no matter what you do, somewhere in the world of your filmmaking, I promise. We're going to bring these. I'm going to leave these all at -3 again. Should be just fine. All right. So a lot of elements go into a punch, from clothing to the whoosh to everything else. So let's see what we've got here. There's the slap part of the skin. It's got a whoosh to it, which I really don't like and I don't really want to use. So I'm going to just cut to I don't want to cut everybody. There we go. I'm just going to cut to the punch part. What else have we got here? There's our whoosh that I like. There's another one with whoosh that I want to get rid of, but it's got a lot of kind of comedy body. And how would we know where this crunch really is? I mean, there's a lot of junk in here. How would we tell? Well, you can... most digital audio workstations will allow you to scrub, and right now, unfortunately, Audition is not quite as accurate as we wish it would be. But as soon as you see these low frequencies, my guess is that's where you're going to want to find your attack. Oops, I didn't mean to do that at all. There. No, please. Thank you. But yeah, that'll work. What else have we got? A nice little extra layer of wetness. And it's got a little bit of a whoosh to it too, which I really don't want. Not quite. Not quite. Probably here. Nope. When you can't see it in the waveform, then you just use your eyeballs, and look at that. I'm just too far. Here's all the bass frequencies. There it is. Give it a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more. There. Nice. We'll cut. And then what else? Oh, yes. The arm of the puncher. We got to have that. Anything else in here? What's this? Oh, nice skin. So we will put this at the front of the file. Good. And then, last but certainly not least, got to have that. Good. So we're just going to line this up on a marker. Here's our marker for the impact, let's call it. We're just going to drag these together. Here's the whoosh, probably something like this. Heavy face, wet crunch. Here's the slap. We'll put it here. And the grunt somewhere back here. And the clothes flapping will be at the very, very beginning. Ooh, that's just beefy. Let's see how our whoosh is doing. Yeah, okay. This needs to be a little bit stronger. And the close needs to be a heck of a lot quieter. Just very subtle. There we go. In fact, we might want to add it just so that it's just shy of the whoosh. Don't need it to do much more than that. And I'm adding my crossfades. There, very, very subtle. Okay, now let's see if we can balance out these sounds. There's our slap. Okay, that one's okay. That's that massive one, which we can pull down. That's nice and juicy. I like that. Let's see. This giant one may still be too much. Let's mute it and see how we do. The juicy one's too loud. That's just too bright. There. And let's turn on our giant hit. Still too loud. I don't want it to sound like a cartoon. Just split the difference. There we go. It's still a little comedic, but. And we can bring the clothes up just a little bit. There we go. And our guy has a really late reaction, so we're going to bring him in close. Even closer. There we go. Awesome. Yeah. Now, in the real world, would this work? It's too much. I mean, it's just way too much. We might get rid of our comedy crush here. Yeah. Now, on this one, we still have the plugins that we use for the gunshot. So we might add the morph and the low air. And we'll turn the dry signal to wet. Ooh, deep. Let's split the difference. Yeah. Now let's put them together. Ooh, you feel the lows now. Ooh. Without there being some weird comedy going on. Cool. I'm going to bring the close up just a little bit more. There. That just hurts. And, of course, you can add the room back in. We had turned it off earlier. Let's add our room. Yeah.
Let's add our guy to it. Oop. Let's turn him here, bus A. And put the pan over here for the reverb. There we go. Cool. Just a bunch of stuff layered together. This is obviously a more complicated scenario for sound effects, but very basic for the kinds of things that we're going to be doing.
So you can see sound effects is a lot of fun and an unending, a limitless supply of things that you can do to create awesome impact, immersion, and power for your audience by layering and just going out and getting your own sounds and merging them with pre-existing libraries, all kinds of trouble you can get yourself into. We'll see you in post.